Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Watea, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
That's better. Kia ora, Aotearoa. I know. You've seen the news and want to know what the bloody hell is going on. I will discuss what happened today as my final word, but there's too much happening right now to allow my issues to overshadow the wider debate. Welcome to the Bradbury Group Election 26, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are working class hero and Labour Party candidate for Mount Roskill, Michael Wood, business desk journalist Maria Slade, and kingmaker Qiulae Wong. Tonight's 1-on-1 in 10 is the leader of the Opposition Chris Hipkins on Luxon's bewildering criticism of business, how punishing kids playing up in school helps anyone, and Winston's unhinged racism and ethno-baby bonus against permanent residents. Our extra 1-on-1 tonight is Green Party MP Lawrence Xu-Nan on Winston starting a diplomatic fight with China just to justify being racist to Lawrence. Shout out to Kiwi Skirt and Kiwi Bird for moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. You make this show one of the most watched live podcasts in New Zealand, and your comments will appear on screen as we go. Shout out to our Watea, Facebook, Rover, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Sky TV whānau. Remember to like and subscribe because that's all that is holding the fourth estate together right now. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn. He'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, ACT never failed to surprise with their shit-trolling masquerading as social policy. The Treaty Principles referendum was civil war baiting. Their desire to turn security guards into private militias was gasp-inducing. And now they are promising to arrest children by weaponising leave the classroom powers for teachers. By targeting disruptive children, ACT want to create new powers allowing teachers to forcibly remove disruptive students, with any resisting student excluded and handed over to the cops. Arresting children is just so perfectly on brand for ACT. We don't have a youth problem in New Zealand, we have an adult problem. We hate young people in this country. We never forgive them for their transgressions. Manhandling kids out of a classroom for disruption and handing them over to the cops isn't a solution. It is a problem looking to create more problems. It's not corporal punishment, but it's certainly general punishment. Why beat up on kids at school? Haven't ACT done enough damage with their shitty lunches? And what teacher is going to relish a chance to physically resist children? A hardcore Christian teacher, that's who. One who wants to bash the Satan out of a little child. You know the teacher. I don't think allowing ACT Party voting Christian teachers who believe in spare the crowbar, spoil the child should be allowed anywhere near our kids. You give kids a second, third, fourth and fifth chance because they're your kids. Isolating them and quarantining them and casting them out writes those kids off. What schools need are more counsellors and wraparound services and a teacher's aide in each classroom. I'm not saying disruptions are good, and we should absolutely minimise their impact on the collective learning of the kids. We all agree 100% with that. But this alpha bullshit routine to give teachers the powers to grab kids is so backwards. These kids don't need to be fined, excluded, manhandled or punished. They need care and empathy and understanding and help and support and encouragement. Paul Henry proclaimed, "There are little shits in our classroom." Sure, but there are bigger pricks in politics. Talking of weak reactionary assholes, Prime Minister Chris Luxon admits that Winston is racist for his rant at Green MP Lawrence Xu-Nan, but gutlessly keeps him on anyway and won't tell us what he told Winston. After butching up and denouncing Stuart Nash in the hope Luxon could look tough to the electorate, Luxon's new Stuart Nash strength has melted into the usual Winston weakness. If the Prime Minister admits what his foreign minister has said is racist, why is he keeping him on? Just consider what Winston has done here. Our foreign minister has started a diplomatic fight with our largest trading partner to justify his racist rant at a Green MP. Is National really saying that racism is more acceptable than sexism? Is that the defence? Luxon is so compromised and spineless at this point, his position is fetal. He can't sack Winston because it would mean the end of his lame duck government. How are they supposed to work together after the election? This isn't a government in waiting. It's a government waiting to be put out of its misery. Short of burning a cross on Luxon's front lawn, what does Winston have to do to get sacked? And finally, comrades, just when you didn't think it could get any crazier, Winston announced his cash bonuses for pure-blood ethno-baby policy, which seems a tad eugenics, doesn't it? The cash bonuses are only for pure-blood citizens, not the bastard offspring of permanent residents he intends to strip voting rights from. Cash for eugenics is a bold and brave new policy that hasn't been seen since, help me out with this one, folks, 1930s, 1940s. Sure, so if a pureblood has a baby with a permanent resident, the baby gets the cash bonus. But if the relationship ends and she has a baby with another permanent resident, no cash bonus. Could you imagine what would happen if the Māori Party called for a cash bonus only for Māori babies? Could you imagine how crazy Mike Hosking would go hearing that? So how come New Zealand First ethno baby cash bonus isn't drawing the same heat? This isn't about helping working mums and dads cover the cost of raising kids. This is about producing more of the right kind of babies. Yeah, nah. We need ACT out of our schools and Winston out of our wombs. The political panel all stars up shortly, Whānau, but for this week's 1-on-1 in 10 with the Leader of the Opposition, Chris Hipkins. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Always great fun to talk to you, Bomber. How are you going?
I'm not arrested yet, brother. Comrade, we have this insane situation whereby the Foreign Minister of New Zealand is starting diplomatic fights with our largest trading partner to justify being racist to a Green Party MP. How untenable is Winston as Foreign Minister?
No, it's completely untenable for Winston Peters to be Foreign Affairs Minister at this point. You know, look, Jim Bolger had the courage and the principles to sack Winston Peters. Jenny Shipley had the courage and principles to sack Winston Peters. Helen Clark, when the time came and the pressure came on, she stood Winston Peters down from cabinet. Winston Peters has well and truly crossed the line here. What differentiates Christopher Luxon from those other three prime ministers that I just mentioned? He won't do his job, which would, if he was doing it, result in Winston Peters being stood down at the very least right at the moment.
Mark Mitchell and Nicola Willis have all hinted that sacking Winston would start a snap election. Is that cowardice or leadership? And have you ruled out working with Winston?
I've made it very clear. Winston Peters will not be serving as Minister of Foreign Affairs in any government that I lead. He cannot do that. You can't go around insulting our largest trading partner, not to mention every Kiwi Chinese person who, frankly, is now being subjected to even more emboldened racism in New Zealand,
right.
Not to mention the fact that our Indian community was already being subjected to emboldened racism because of the comments of Winston Peters and Shane Jones. You cannot be Minister of Foreign Affairs and engage in that kind of behaviour.
Combine this racist rant with the desire by New Zealand First to strip 700,000 permanent residents of their voting rights, plus their cash bonus for pure-blood Kiwis to have more babies. How is this anything other than pure xenophobia by New Zealand First in election year?
No, it's xenophobia, it's race baiting, you can call it what you will. It's importing the culture war politics that we've seen in other countries around the world here into New Zealand in a way that's designed to divide off a share of the vote, not actually to govern the country in the best interests of everybody.
Working mums and dads absolutely need more support. We should nationalise ECE instead of the oligopoly it is now and provide working mums and dads free early childhood care. We should extend parental leave. We should allow more whānau to be caregivers for babies until they can be taken in by ECE. Winston's ethno-baby bonus, however, is there to make the right kind of babies, not support working parents. What happens if a permanent resident has a baby with a Kiwi and they get the baby bonus, but the mother has another baby with another permanent resident? That baby gets no baby bonus. Isn't New Zealand first with this idea actively creating two classes of New Zealander?
I think people can see the politics behind what New Zealand First are proposing here. Again, it's part of their plan to create a divide, to drive a wedge between New Zealanders in order to carve out a vote share. If they actually cared about people having babies in New Zealand, they would not have voted to cut women's pay. They would not have voted to cut Best Start, which is a payment that's designed to go to new parents when they've just had babies. Winston Peters and New Zealand First voted to cut it in last year's budget.
Yeah.
If they actually cared about working parents, if they actually cared about supporting people who are having babies, they wouldn't have done those things. This is just about politics. There's no principle in this whatsoever.
ACT want to empower teachers to manhandle rowdy kids and security guards to be able to physically restrain people. Why does a party of the individual like ACT get so excited about letting others arrest the individual?
Oh, look, if being annoying was an excuse for manhandling someone, David Seymour would be permanently in a headlock. The reality here is that, they're trying to bring back the 1960s. The teachers can already use physical restraint where there is a safety risk in a classroom.
Yes.
There are guidelines that have been put in place. They were actually developed by Hiki Parata under a national government. I was the opposition spokesperson at the time, and I worked constructively with the then National Party government to pass that through Parliament so that teachers did have certainty. ACT wants to throw all that out of the window. And it's just crazy. There are good guidelines in place at the moment. They keep everybody safe and they keep the teachers safe as well. David Seymour would actually put teachers in more danger,
Yes.
at more risk
Yes.
with his crazy ideas.
Yes. Finally, comrade, 860,000 Kiwis are living in relative poverty. 51% of Māori households go hungry and almost 20% of our youth are unemployed. People are doing it so hard and it's only getting harder. What promise and hope can a Labour-led government give the people of New Zealand?
I can promise the people of New Zealand that cost of living will be the number one issue for us in government. It will be the ruler that we run over every decision we make. Is this going to make life easier for New Zealanders, or is this going to make life harder for New Zealanders? Is this going to mean that there are fewer kids in poverty or more kids in poverty? Those are the questions that we'll be asking every day in every decision we make. So when we promise public transport fare caps, it's because we know it'll make a difference. When we promise to cut the cost of healthcare, it's because we know it will make a difference. No government's got a magic wand that'll solve every cost of living challenge that New Zealand households face, but every government makes choices every day that can make a difference.
Amen. Thank you so much, Chris, for your insight and oversight. We'll talk again with you next month, comrade.
Great to talk to you, Bomber.
Be well. Thanks, brother. The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but now this week's extra one-on-one in 10 with Green Party MP Lawrence Xu-Nan. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Bomber. Thank you so much for having me.
Comrade, can I just start by apologising to you on behalf of all decent Kiwis everywhere? The deplorable, racist manner in which Winston attacked you was beneath the mana of our parliament. You are a conscientious voice in our democracy. You add amazing insight and critique to our democracy. And New Zealand is definitely a better place because you're in it. What does it say to you about how unhinged our politics has become that the foreign minister is starting a fight with China to try and justify his racism against you?
Yeah, I think that the key thing here is what we have is someone who's a product of the New Zealand political system that has allowed someone to get away with something like this over and over and over again. I mean, this is not a new thing. We've seen this for decades, the same kind of politics coming from that one particular person or that one particular party. But I guess the question then is, what is Parliament, what is society willing to do about it? What is governments willing to do about it? Not just currently, but for future governments to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen, to ensure that we are looking at honest politics. I mean, if we're looking at the fact that this sort of conduct would not be acceptable in the workplace, it certainly would not be acceptable in the school environment. It is kind of shocking that we have allowed these sort of behavior. But what has been really heartwarming, and I'm incredibly grateful for this, is the kind of support that we have been getting from across the board. And what it fundamentally also reminds me is that as a core value and principle, that New Zealanders are compassionate, are good, and we do care for each other.
New Zealand First are campaigning on removing the right to vote for 700,000 permanent residents while creating a baby bonus only for babies made with pure-blood New Zealanders. The PM has acknowledged that Winston's comments were racist, yet he is staying on. Is xenophobia the new political vibe for 2026?
I mean, we've seen that not just here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we've seen that globally. We've seen the divide and conquer tactics. But I think what's also really important here in Aotearoa is how we are all brought together under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I think that as a foundation document, whakaputanga is absolutely vital, because on one hand, you have political parties that go and tell migrant communities that Māori and Pasifika are lazy. At the same time, they'll go into those communities and say migrants here are taking your jobs, without addressing the fact that everyday New Zealanders are being ripped off by large corporations, the likes of Google and Meta, etc., who do not pay their fair share of tax here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And that's what the Greens is willing to address.
It is not the fault of migrants coming to New Zealand that we haven't built the infrastructure and public services they need while they're here. Why do we have such a terrible legacy of treating migrants so poorly in this country?
I mean, part of that is because, we see in each election that migrants are often used as scapegoats for political football. And partially, if you're looking at those who are on temporary visa types, your student visa, your working visa, they don't get a chance to vote. They don't get a chance to stay in our political system. So this is, again, if we're looking at from the perspective of how we do honest politics and how the New Zealand public should trust politicians, we should be looking at how policies would affect and would be good for all of us, as opposed to, just the ones who are eligible to vote. I think when we start looking at election and politics from the perspective of who's going to vote for me, we actually lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah. What does go back to where you came from mean to all those migrant Kiwis living in New Zealand?
I mean, a third of Aotearoa New Zealand were not born in New Zealand. Another third's parents are not born in New Zealand. We do see that, there are a lot of generational migration here in Aotearoa New Zealand. And I think that's really important to go from that perspective. But also, as MPs, what's really wild is, everyone is a citizen and you are rightfully here. I grew up here in Aotearoa. I spent most of my school lives, I've got multiple degrees from the University of Auckland. Where am I supposed to go? I have more connection here in Aotearoa than I do with other countries, in other countries. I'm incredibly proud of my whakapapa, of where my heritage is from. But in terms of my, I guess, circle of reference, it is here in Aotearoa.
Yeah, of course. In 2018, Taika Waititi famously said New Zealand is racist AF. Was he right?
Yeah. I think there are certain voices that has been allowed to be platformed, where when something like this happens, is where you see this outpour of support. So I guess my message to a lot of people here in Aotearoa is, when it is safe for you to do so, continue to call out racism, look after each other, and making sure that, we really exemplify the manakitanga that we are so proud of. But we do see aspects of racism. And this is one of the reasons why we need to speak up around things like this. And I mean, incredibly privileged situation to be able to do so. Because as we see before, when New Zealand First went on their anti-India parade, we saw horrifying graffitis outside of a Papatoetoe primary school.
Yeah, we did.
That should not be allowed, because that puts our children at harm. And I think none of us want to see our children come to harm. Finally, maybe except for ACT.
Finally, comrade, what do you think is at stake this election?
That was at stake at this election is what is essentially our future. Whether it's climate change, whether it's healthy environment, whether it's cost of living, whether it is social cohesion, the ability for us to hold together. So I think this is one of the reasons why, from a Greens perspective, that's why we're looking at things like what does affordable living looks like, what does a healthy nature look like, what does honest politics look like for all of us. And I think this is where having those one-to-one conversations with people has been so incredibly heartwarming throughout this entire period. And I'm just grateful basically every day to be able to be in a position where I get to have that one-on-one conversation with a whole bunch of people with all sorts of interests coming from all sorts of background, with thoughts of all sorts of experience to be able to share with me.
Thank you, Lawrence, for sharing your insight and oversight this evening. All power to your arm, comrade. Good luck in the election.
Thank you so much, Mama.
Thanks,
have a good
comrade.
evening.
You too, brother. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is a working-class hero who is the Labour candidate for Mount Roskill. 50% House of Gryffindor, 50% Hammer of Lennon. Michael Wood. Kia ora, comrade.
Kia ora,
Welcome
Bomber.
to the show. One word to describe this week, please, sir.
I think this week it has to be parent-child mentality.
Yeah. Our next panellist is too good to be on the show. She's one of the best business journalists in New Zealand, and it's the reason you pay Business Desk for a subscription. The ever-brilliant Maria Slade. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, ma'am.
I put it into Copilot, actually, and Copilot did quite well. It came up with combustible. Based on the fact of, racial comment sagas. We've had people kicked out of Parliament today. It's been a week.
And last but certainly not least, she is the fresh-faced political hope of an entire generation locked out of home ownership. She's for all those children of National Party parents who are too rich to vote Green. 50% Hufflepuff, 50% Ravenclaw, 100% universal basic income. I think that's how the math works. It's the kingmaker, Qiulae Wong. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Kia ora.
One word describe the week, please, ma'am.
Expectations. What do we expect of a foreign minister? What do we expect of a prime minister? I think voters, now that we have an election coming up, have a chance to have their voice heard around what kind of behaviour we do expect of those leaders.
Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, Luxon's extraordinary comments to business. And can the economy turn in time for the election? Issue 2, how untenable is Winston's position as foreign minister after his racist rant? And issue 3 tonight, New Zealand first ethno-baby bonus versus acts arresting disobedient children. What was the dumbest idea of the week? Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show where each panellist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money is on Michael, where we start talking about the cost of living on working people. He fires up like Lennon's hammer. Let's kick things off with issue 1, and that is the extraordinary speech Luxon gave the Rotorua business meeting where he criticised negativity and went on a long and rambling tirade about how businesses needed to stop being babies. The backlash to his attack on small businesses was so extreme that he was forced to apologise. I'm not certain how kicking businesses who are failing because of his economic policies is quite the vote winner our PM seems to think it is. Maria, we have some of the most liquidations on record, with unemployment set to go higher this week. Why did the PM think attacking businesses who are failing was the week's smartest play?
Oh, look, who could say what he was thinking? He read the room completely wrong. And the idea that the economy is going to pick up in time for the election, which is, 2 or 3 months away now, is we've run out of road. It's not going to happen. So if they think that that's going to give them a bit of lift underneath their wings, they're sadly delusional. They're going to have to come up with much more visionary kind of comments in the next few months to convince business.
You've met him, right? Have you been in the room with him?
I've been in a room with him. I've never personally had
Sure.
conversations with him. I think actually my colleague Liam Dan wrote a piece this last week, and he made a very valid point, and I think it can apply to a lot of prime ministers. That Luxon is actually perfectly personable and friendly and nice if you meet him in person, but that's just not translating onto a television screen or across a microphone. And I think Helen Clark actually suffered from that a bit.
She
too.
did. You're right. You're absolutely right.
She came across as a bit gruff and
yes.
But in
that's
person,
right.
she was charming, absolutely charming, mind like a steel trap. I think it is very hard to you've got to be, not everyone's a John Key to be able to translate that personality across the airwaves.
Yeah. Follow-up question. Matthew Hooton, editor of The Post, argues that National still have time to roll Luxon as leader after that performance and his refusal to punish Winston. Will some National MPs be eyeing up a stabbing?
Oh, Hooton.
That's how everyone says it. Hooton!
For flip's sake, how many weeks is it out? I mean, that would be political suicide to roll your leader at this point. Am I right, politicians in the room here?
It's not looking good. It's not looking good, though.
I don't think Matthew's seen a National Party leader he doesn't want to roll and replace with a libertarian philosopher king, much like himself, right?
Qiulae, Rotorua Business Chamber CEO Melanie Short told Luxon about the results of a survey of 82 business leaders in Rotorua in April and May that found a sharp fall in confidence since October linked to rising costs and a lack of demand. She asked the PM, how long can we hang on? That's what she asked. His response was to criticise her for being negative, and then he chastised everyone else there. Why should telling the truth to the PM about the impact of his economic policies get written off and demeaned like that?
Yeah, I think that the silly remarks are indicative of when they've clearly been throwing old solutions at new problems, and it's not working. Our economy is not recovering, and I think we need to think a bit differently about how we build a different kind of economy for the future, and that's that kind of bigger visionary thinking has been lacking the last few years, and so I guess the only thing left to do is blame each other, and I think we're starting to see that in society, and we're seeing it in politics.
Follow-up question. The PM has ruled out working with Top, which none of us had that on our bingo card,
Does anyone really believe it?
Self-mutilation right at the end of a press conference. I mean, it was just an incredible... But how can you credibly cut a deal with a leader who has written you off?
Because we're going to do politics differently. And, I mean, he said that based on a cursory glance at our policy. So, there's clearly not that much substance, or, it doesn't appear to be that much substance behind the decision.
Right.
And there's actually a lot about the tax policy I think National would be in favour of, tax cuts to working people.
I don't think they would be.
I don't know if it's...
I know National. No. Tax cuts for them, not working people. No, you got it wrong. It's the other end of town who need the bloody help. Michael, New Zealand is two huge, sparsely populated islands. We've always needed the state to be the 40% foundation stone, and that has always required a government prepared to work with business. What Luxon has inadvertently revealed is that he has zero interest in working with business, and he's only interested in working for his donors. Labour is good for capitalism. National is good for capitalists.
I think what you've got here are Olympian levels of deflection. Yeah, you forget sometimes this guy's been the Prime Minister for 3 years.
Right.
The parliamentary majority. The election pitch was that we're the people you can trust to fix the cost of living and fix the economy. And 3 years later, both of those things are worse. And so where do you put the blame for that? If you're not going to take it yourself, you put it onto everyone else. And that's what these business owners copped it. Look, I am spending a lot of time just going around the small businesses in Mount Roskill.
And they hurting?
They have never had it so bad. Not at the depths of COVID was it as bad, and were there as many closures and as many shuttered up shops as there are right now. And when you get down to the core of it, it's an economy that has seized up because this government has had an agenda of cuts and disinvestment. No one has any money in their pockets.
Yeah.
No one is spending at the local cafe, the local business, and it becomes a vicious cycle. No demand in this economy as a direct result of this government's policies. Luxon's got to wear that, not blame other people.
Follow-up question. Labour is now leading most of the issues concerning Kiwis. This was out this last week. Yet the election is still so close. The latest Roy Morgan poll that came out just a couple of hours ago, it puts Labour, Greens, Te Pāti Māori and Top as the government, but it's still pretty bloody close. Why are we not seeing the left really step up and get those numbers? What's going on?
We're feeling very positive about this campaign, but there's not a microgram of complacency.
No.
Nearly every MMP election in the end ends up being pretty close between the blocks.
Yes.
And so everyone's vote does matter. So that's the message, is if you want to get rid of this divisive government that's made working people poorer and is now trying to set us against each other, then you need to make sure you're enrolled. You need to get out and vote for change.
Your thoughts on the gerrymandering of the bloody enrolment process? 2 weeks it's being wiped. That's
totally transparent. The Electoral Commissioner themselves said that this doesn't make any difference in terms of our ability to efficiently progress the count. The officials advise it will mean that a large number of New Zealanders' votes potentially won't count that otherwise would have counted.
And we know that 80% of those votes always go left. Always go left.
So that's the situation, and it just makes us feel stronger that we need to be organised, we need to be out in our communities, and everyone who cares about our democracy and cares about a better, more hopeful future, get your family enrolled, get your workmates enrolled, get people in your community enrolled. Don't let these bastards get away with it.
Amen. Quick round. Unemployment is now 5.3%. What will it be when it's announced later this week, Maria?
It's likely to go up a bit because it's obviously the last indicator to pick up. One issue I will take with what Michael's saying is we can't forget that the agricultural part of our economy is actually going quite well at the moment.
Gangbusters.
But certainly the small business people of Auckland
and Wellington
are feeling it. So, it's definitely, as we have discussed, it's an economy of two islands at the moment.
Yeah. Qiulae, what are we going to see with the unemployment?
I'm going to go 6%.
Jesus.
Ooh, hopefully not.
Oh, shut a break. That's terrifying. Michael.
Well, Treasury's estimates at the budget were that it had moved to 5.5%.
But they have been woeful in there and underestimating where things are going.
Just put it in real terms, so far we've got 40,000 more people out of work than at the beginning of this government's term. And the rate for 15 to 19-year-olds is now 25%. Oh. You talk about ticking social time bomb. If you're worried about homelessness, you're worried about youth crime, we actually need to have the go to the top of the cliff, and that's the problem right now in our communities.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and that is how untenable is Winston's position as Foreign Minister after his crazy racist rant. Qiulae, Top have ruled Winston out from being Foreign Minister in any government you are part of. Why can't the PM share your backbone?
I guess it's because of the threat of a snap election. I think that's the only thing you can really read into it. You'd think he would come down harder on that because a lot of his voters are appalled by that behaviour as well. I think that Lawrence was right. This is not a view that the majority of New Zealanders hold, and they expect better from a Prime Minister to make the right decision in this situation.
Follow-up question. When you consider all the terrible, terrible things New Zealand First have done and are promising to do, how could Top agree to be part of any government that requires New Zealand First?
So I think as I said before, we are really trying to do politics differently. And
it
is hard. When people are slinging mud left, right and centre, it is really hard to keep trying to find common ground. But we have to. We have to keep trying to do that. So we will sit around the table and try to find alignment if we have to. There are things that they've campaigned on that we agree with. You know, we need to tackle competition in our supermarket and our energy sector.
Absolutely.
I would argue that they've had the greatest opportunity to do that with the most number of years in Parliament, in government. And they've not done it. But if we share that objective, we might have different ways to go about it, but potentially there's common ground there. But Winston Peters in that role as Minister of Foreign Affairs is not something that we can be a part of and support.
Amen. Michael, how insulting is it to our migrant whānau that Winston can make these comments about China, India and fellow Māori and be immune to any consequences?
Well, look, more than 50% of my community of Mount Roskill are born outside of New Zealand. And
how are they
it's a slap in the face to all of those people. People can now be clear that not only is a vote for New Zealand First, but a vote for National or ACT or any of their candidates is a vote for a continuation of this.
Right.
Look, I've been thinking about 2 things. First is that Winston Peters for many years had quite a decent fine man called Peter Brown as his deputy leader of New Zealand First.
He did.
Peter was an English expat, born outside of New Zealand, but Winston's comments about this kind of thing never tended to go to people like him, right? The second thing that I've been thinking about is that at almost exactly the same time that this erupted, Winston and his party in the Parliament, along with the rest of the government, voted to cut the pay of working people through the Holidays Act. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to have their annual pay cut.
Yeah.
And so what we're getting from these guys is this divisive, headline-hogging culture wars politics here. Hey, we're on your side, ordinary working people, sort of this cosplay stuff, Shane Jones and his silly hat, all of this kind of thing. At the same time, what they're actually doing is sticking it to ordinary working people. So we've got to make sure that while we condemn the racism, the divisive stuff, and it was so good to hear Chris Hipkins just being clear about that we don't let that obscure the other stuff that they're actually doing, because in part, these tactics are about diverting people's attention.
Yeah.
So we've got to keep the focus on both of those things.
Follow-up question, why are New Zealand first in double-digit support when they are selling this kind of malice? Does it say something's broken about us?
Well, let's see what happens in November. I've got a great deal of confidence in the fundamental goodwill and decency of New Zealanders, and time again. And it was great to hear from Lawrence, who's a really decent guy. I've got to know over the years,
great guy.
that he's had that positivity and support coming back. There are, unfortunately, in every society, always a pool of people whose views are divisive, who do look for difference and do militate against it. But what Winston's also fishing in at the moment is a pool of people whose lives are crap.
Yeah, they're hurt.
They're hurt because the economy has failed them,
yes,
potentially over decades, and are feeling left out. That's not an excuse for this kind of behaviour, but it's a breeding ground for it.
Yeah.
And so we've got to combat the divisive stuff and the racist stuff now, and we've actually got to build a more cohesive society so it's not so fertile for populist trash politicians to try and win votes out of it.
Amen. Maria, Luxon can't sack Winston because it would mean the end of the government. Is the Prime Minister effectively being held hostage by Winston until November?
Winston is acting according to his nature, which is as
Chaos.
an extremely extremely canny populist politician.
Yeah.
That is what he does. I think in this particular instance, he's gone too far. He has stepped over a line that I think most New Zealanders would agree. Even a person in my house who does not share my views on many things said this evening that it's just out and out racist what he said, and it's not acceptable. And if Jerry Brownlee is holding him to a different standard as Qiulae Wong,
which is what she suggested, right?
Alleged tonight, well, then that is wrong. He does need to be held to account. The foreign minister of all people cannot go around making comments like that in our parliament.
Right. And I think Lawrence made a really good point about that wouldn't be acceptable in the workplace. No one could do that in a New Zealand workplace and expect to still have their job, right? He does it, no punishment.
It's that, and it's also, when you're a minister, you're not just representing your party, you are representing the country.
Yes.
And from being in those roles, Winston will sometimes be having to, in his office, communicate with compatriots in China about helping New Zealanders, for example, who are in a difficult spot, have been arrested, or there's some sort of dispute that's going on. And so there's actually something here about the cheap short-term pre-election politics interfering with a fundamental duty to serve the country as well. And I think that kind of needs to be named.
Quick round to all three of you. What happens if National Act and New Zealand First are re-elected, Maria? If they're re-elected, is it just crazy town?
Well, I guess it'll be more of the same.
But a weaker National, if that's even possible.
Yeah, that's kind of the wild card, actually. That's the worrying, a lot of people would say the worrying wild card, because the ACT parties caused a fair bit of chaos this term with policies that were obviously part of the coalition agreement but haven't really advanced the cause of the country, a lot of people would say. The regulation ministry, for example.
Unbelievable. The gold-plated palace that he's built.
So I think that's the sort of the real question is how much power would these partners in a newly formed centre-right coalition
And you'd have to say more,
hold.
Surely.
Well, we'll have to see the results, won't we?
Yeah.
But that's the bit you've sort of got to look out for.
Qiulae, if they get another term, I think a lot of people would be really worried. What happens if this government get back in and National's weaker?
Yeah, I think if ACT and New Zealand First in particular have got more power, there's going to be more time wasting, more kicking the can down the road on the big things that actually matter. I think if opportunity has to be in there, we would be able to temper it.
Yes.
If they really needed us to make up the numbers for a government, I think we can make a stronger coalition for either side, whether it's Labour or National, and certainly try to bring them back to important issues.
If you went with them and and everyone would be looking at you, hey, your boys are going crazy here. It's up to you to rail them in.
Thankfully, it's not just me.
What's your boy doing this week? He's going crazy over here, and you'll get it. You'll get it in the neck.
Well, if we're in there though, then Winston won't be foreign minister. So,
thank you.
Okay, that
small.
could be a win.
The silver lining of a mushroom cloud, Michael. If these guys,
maybe it'll be Shane Jones instead.
Oh,
yeah.
If they get a second term, they will cement the damage in, won't they?
I mean, if people have found the infighting and one-upmanship of this term dispiriting for our country, well, just imagine what it would be like for another 3 years.
Right.
When you've got a leader as weak as Luxon, who would potentially be weakened by a sub-30 election result if they could somehow do that and pull together a government. It just doesn't bear thinking about, and it just needs to be more fuel to the fire for people to actually think more hopefully about what a better alternative is and work towards that.
Another quick round to all of you. Will we go all the way to November or snap election beforehand, Maria?
Oh, I think we'll go all the way to November now.
Yep. Qiulae?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that Luxon can risk it.
Right.
It seems most likely, but we are now seeing, weekly theatrics from this lot. So we'll see. We'll be ready whenever we need to be.
Amen. Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that is New Zealand First Ethno Baby Bonus versus Acts Arresting Disobedient Children. What was the dumbest idea this week? Michael, okay. What was dumbest? Baby cash bonuses for purebloods or allowing teachers to manhandle kids? What's dumber?
Look, it's a very tough race, but I think the addition of Paul Henry into the mix as the salesman for the second policy probably means that one pips it at the post. And look, you made the point in your opening comments around that one, Bomber. Why don't these guys go and talk to a teacher and actually ask what it's like in a classroom and actually what would help? And if you go and you talk to a teacher and you ask them what's happening in their classroom, what they want, what they tell you at the moment is stop messing with our curriculum and making our lives difficult by bombarding and overloading us and chopping and changing things constantly, and give us more in-classroom support to deal with the kids who do have learning difficulties and who are disruptive. It's a real issue.
Yes, it is.
And teachers will tell you that.
Yeah.
And you actually need to focus on what's going to fix it and listen to the people who know what they're on about.
Sometimes these kids wigging out in class, they've got a whole bunch of issues going on with them, right? They may be on the spectrum in some way. They may have emotional distress going on. There's something happening there. And I cannot imagine in what scenario legally allowing teachers to grab that kid and drag it. How's that going to make it any better? Not just for the kid who's getting dragged out, but for the whole class. That's traumatic, right?
It's similar to the balmy stuff they were putting up around encouraging small shopkeepers to be armed and this kind of thing.
Yes.
It's appealing to a certain kind of macho politics. You just know, if journalists ask them the hard questions, that there has been no research around this.
No.
There has been no looking into what actually works internationally, no conversations with the sector, no policy analysis as to how it would actually work and what the downstream
I don't think they
consequences
even talked to teachers, did
of
they?
it would be. Of course not. Of course not. So it is just a joke, and it's worrying that a party of government that has serious pretensions in the education portfolio and has an associate minister of education is putting forward some of this sort of cockamamie stuff. It just shows that this is a government whose, as you say, whose time has come. We need to get them out in 3 months' time.
Maria, who are these policies appealing to? Like, I'm trying to go, well, who would go, yes, I get to bash kids at school. I don't know who this is for.
I've got a friend who's a teacher at a low decile secondary school in the lower North Island, and they get difficult kids. Not all of them, but they do get difficult kids.
Yeah.
And there was one girl in particular that was more difficult than most. And my friend found out later that this girl's mother had been murdered.
Yeah.
So she saw her in a new light and actually thought that her behaviour wasn't that bad, really, given what the kid had been through. So, yeah, I mean, that's just the thing. The kids that act out at school have got a whole lot of other stuff going on. You know, most sensible people know that. But I would like to talk about the baby bonus, though.
Yes. So what do you think?
Because I think the New Zealand First Party need to maybe read the international news a bit more, because this sort of thing's been tried all around the world and it doesn't work.
Right.
It just doesn't work. There are so many other factors influencing a family or a woman to decide whether they would have a child or another child. That, you know, a little bit of cash is just not going to cut the mustard.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds good, but it doesn't work.
The requirement that one of them has to be a Kiwi, a New Zealander. If the Māori Party had come out with we want to give Māori babies just $3,000, just only Māori babies, there would be outrage and there would be uproar. But somehow this is sort of acceptable.
Oh, it's just sort of nonsense, really. You know, like I was talking to a friend, a contact, I guess, a Chinese lady the other day, who is a very interesting person, actually. She's originally Chinese, lived here for years. Husband is Swiss. So she's got these Swiss-Chinese children here in New Zealand, and she has this sort of great philosophy about, like, she likes to try and bring in international students, but she likes to place them in situations where they're not too affected by lots of other kids of their same, you know, whether it's Chinese or whatever they are, because she really wants people to experience the real New Zealand, the multicultural kind of society of New Zealand, and she feels very, very passionately about that.
Right.
That's something that her little bit she wants to give back to this country that's become her home. Yeah. And so surely these are the sorts of people we want to encourage and build up in our society, I would have thought.
Yeah. Qiulae, how come ACT and New Zealand First can suggest insanely stupid policies, but your land tax is so off the charts that National ruled you out? I mean, ACT are suggesting at the moment to cut the entire government by 50%. No explanation how they do that, but just do it. And everyone goes, but your land tax, it would be the end of Western civilization. You know it.
And the baby payments from New Zealand First, how much is that going to cost and where is that money going to come from? Surely there's going to have to be an increased tax somewhere, and National not ruling them out based on that. So, yeah, double standards. I think it's just tribal politics at play in terms of why we get treated differently. I think on the baby thing as well, like what's quite interesting about our party is a lot of our candidates are born outside of New Zealand or have come from quite multicultural families. And
Second generation migrants sort of.
And I think they're attracted to our party because we embrace this diversity of perspectives view. And I think that's, you know, obviously I'm biased. I think that we've got some of the best policies, but I think that's because it's made up of so many different people contributing to those ideas. If we get to a point where we're a country and we all think the same, we all come from the same backgrounds, cultural beliefs, you know, we will not deliver the kinds of solutions that we need for the big wicked challenges of today. We need that diversity in New Zealand to thrive.
Or we'll suffer culturally. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of the show. Comrades, you need to wrap the final show with a final word. Michael, your final word this week, please, sir.
I'd ask people to lift their spirits. We're less than 100 days now to an election at which we can get rid of this nasty, divisive and failed government. But actually we need to be positive and hopeful. We need to show people something better.
Yes.
If you're an 18, 19 or 20-year-old who's thinking about leaving this country, then we can actually build a good place for you here. Yes. We have so much that is going for us.
Yes.
With the right policies, we can make sure that there are decent, good, well-paid jobs for people again. With the right policies, we can make sure that working people have security and opportunity and aren't scared that the next set of rights are going to be taken away from them.
Preach.
With the right policies, we can make people in our country feel respected and included and that their contributions are valued. And with the right leadership from politicians and with the right policies, we can once again lead the world in terms of policies like climate change that have been let go so much by this government. So don't despair in amongst the chaos and the negativity and the division of now.
Preach.
Turn that into some hope and turn that into some action. Less than 100 days to go and we can have something better for our country and for our young people.
Comrades,
vote Labour.
We need this man back in Parliament. Lord, we need this man back in Parliament. Good luck, my friend.
Cheers, mate.
Qiulae, your final word, please, ma'am.
Yeah, I think elections are an awesome time because a lot of the time most New Zealanders will tune out from politics. They turn on the news and they see them yelling across the house and they're like, no thanks, I don't really want to see that today. But now is the time that we have to talk about it. We have to turn our mind to it, and it's okay to have those conversations at the dinner table with your whānau and your friends. And so I just encourage people to be curious and ask questions and talk about what kind of future we want for this country.
Preach. Good luck. Maria, your final word, please, ma'am.
Can I change the subject completely?
You go for it. You know you can. You do anything you want. Jesus.
I did this investigation that we published last week about a property flipper in South Auckland who has allegedly been targeting the Filipino community and saddling them with debt they can't afford, and in some cases, KiwiSaver first home deposits. Allegedly going west, and there's a whole set of stuff that's happening there. We've talked to quite a number of victims of this scheme, and the person at the heart of this scheme is twice bankrupted, and he runs a finance company. And so my question to the various government departments was, how is someone who's twice bankrupted allowed to run a finance company? And they said he wasn't bankrupt at the time. So I just feel like there's huge gaps in our regulatory system.
And you've warned about this before. You've highlighted these gaps.
Yeah, and another part to this is that this outfit was trading properties, but because they are private sellers of properties, they don't need to be licensed real estate agents. And this is something that we've seen time and again with a lot of property developers. If they're selling their own stock, they are privately selling real estate, so they do not need to adhere to the same standards as a licensed real estate agent.
I didn't know that.
Yes, that's true. Anywho, my point being that I think there's huge gaps in our regulatory system surrounding the property sector that a lot of low-income people or more vulnerable people are being affected by. And
the regulation should be protecting them, right?
Yeah, I think there's big questions around a lot of that activity.
Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word. Brothers and sisters, I was at court today, and this is what I can say. And that's all I can say. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Wātea News. Everything on the show is an opinion and shouldn't be taken seriously enough to attempt defamation action against us. We were joking. We're never serious about anything. And officially, a small wetter in Avondale is legally the owner. Good luck finding him. Don't forget to follow, like and comment.